Tēnā koe utira, tēnā koutou, ai rungi i te āhuatanga me te whakanikitanga o te wā. Welcome to this presentation, Pātaka Whenua, an introduction. So first, as it says here, I've got to offer an apology. The video version of this presentation has been a long time in the works, following two successful bring your own device workshops that were held at Te Akamori o Rotorua Library in early 2024. A lack of time and a recent cosmetic change to Pātaka Whenua that rendered a version of this video obsolete, as well as a change of workplace, all contributed to this delay. With the dust now settled, here finally is the completed video. Should you have any comments on the content, other than maybe the spelling and those kind of things, but any other comments, please feel free to forward them to me at rokuracrs@outlook.com. So let's just get straight into it. Pātaka Whenua. So one of the things I've heard many times since its introduction late last year, people getting into it earlier this year, Pātaka Whenua is rubbish compared to what we had before. And yes, I agree, but also and no. So hopefully this workshop will give you a chance to know what I mean by saying yes and no. A few ground rules, and these are the same rules that I gave out at the workshop. Firstly, I don't work for Māori Land Court or the Ministry of Justice, nor am I in any way affiliated with them, nor was I involved in the creation of Pātaka Whenua. I'm a researcher, just like many of you, whether it's a whānau researcher or a professional researcher. I'm also a consultant that just wants to share and possibly learn from others. So if there's things that you have learnt, I'd love to hear from you as well. Also, your issues with Pātaka Whenua are likely the same issues I have had, or that many of us have had. So this is a chance to share information, experiences, the good and bad, and to learn from each other. However, if you merely want to offer a complaint about the system, please direct these to the MRC, because there is literally nothing I can do about them. And I probably agree with many of them anyway. A few bona fides. So background, I'm a historian and a researcher who specialises in land tenure. I have over 17 years of experience. 7 of those years I worked for the Māori Land Court, and the last 8.5 years I was a senior advisor and a research leader at Rotorua Lakes Council. Currently I work in an iwi space on heritage matters, as well as the research lead of my own consultancy business. I've written 2 research studies on the Māori Land Court. One was called Imagine Boundaries, the Native Land Court of Māori Identity at Otago Uni. And another was a game of Mu, a study of the records of the Māori Land Court in the Waiariki district and their use in reconstructing Māori histories, which I did at Otago Uni in 2019. No, I'm not a lawyer, and I cannot and will not give you legal advice. What I will share is my experience as a researcher. That's the kind of lens that I'm applying to Pātaka Whenua. For legal advice, see a lawyer. Process advice, just go down to the Māori Land Court and have a talk to the guys down there. Right? Those are the kind of people you need to talk regards to process and regards to legal advice in particular. My philosophy is know thy enemy. I'm not to say that the court's your enemy, but they're the subject matter at hand. If you know more about them, the better it's going to go. And that's what I said there. The better you know the court and its systems, the easier it will be for you to navigate and find the answer to your question or questions, and the better a researcher you will be. Before we head over to Pātaka Whenua, and with this in mind, we're going to do a bit of a Māori Land 101 tour. How much of this information you understand and retain will directly correlate to how useful Pātaka Whenua will be to you. Right? If you know this little bit of background, it's really going to help you try and rediscover the information that you're after. So it'll be fairly quickish. We have to cover a lot of territory, but I'll try and do so quite quickly. Lastly, I think this is the last one, skullduggery. So it's a word that you will hear nowhere else but in the hallways and research rooms of the Māori Land Court. And the old Native Land Court, yes, has a lot to answer for regarding the erosion of the tribal estate and distortion of our traditional land tenure. But I would say that around 99% of the more modern issues that people have referred to me from time to time as involving skullduggery have come from a misunderstanding of innocent events, not so much that people were trying to rip anyone off. The effect of wills and whānau arrangements in particular have caused many a misunderstanding. That being said, there's still that 1%, so there are things that may have happened in the modern context, but 99% of the time, it's just either a lack of information or lack of understanding of the process of what actually happened. So very, very quickly, Māori land tenure. This is a very basic breakdown of how Māori land came about. So pre-colonisation, land was held by Māori under our own tikanga and our own kawa, our own laws, if you want to call it that. And at that time, I suppose the English law would see that as being customary land. Our land was customary land. It was held under our own customs. Colonisation kind of changed that a little bit and changed some of those categorizations. So customary land, when people came over here from overseas, one of the issues they had is if they wanted to lease the land, or if they wanted to rent land, lease, purchase land, all of those kind of things. It was really hard to know who owned what. So in the 1860s, the Native Land Court was kind of created to turn customary land, where we weren't too sure who owned what. Well, the buyers weren't not so much Māori, they knew, but people didn't know, and they were coming here and they wanted to purchase it. So the Native Land Court, the early job of the Native Land Court was to convert customary land into something that was more formal, which is essentially what we now call Māori freehold title. And by more formal, I mean it had identified boundaries. Had a survey, had identified owners, a list of owners, and identified their shares that they had. Yeah. So that's how we get Māori freehold land. But the other way that customary land could change, pre-1860, in the early days of the colony, is if land was sold or land was taken. All right. So if there was an early sale of land to a European, to Pātaka, then that land would no longer be customary land, and it wouldn't be classed as Māori freehold land either. It'll be general land, what is now called general land. If land was taken, for example, land takings in the Waikato and land takings at Tauranga and up the East Coast and those kind of places, if the government took land, or even took land for roads and things like that, for schools perhaps, if they took that, then that out of customary land, that also became what is today known as general land. Yeah? So if we follow the chart down, land that was sold or taken in the early days of the colony, stopped being customary land, stopped being owned by Māori, and was now owned by the Crown or other people. Yeah, so that became general land. Customary land that was still around in the 1860s, that was investigated by the court. The court would decide the ownership after a big court case, and then it would spit out or turn customary land into what's called Māori freehold land today. If we follow the chart down, Māori freehold land, if Māori freehold land was subsequently sold or taken by the Crown, or sold to non-Māori, then it eventually became general land, what is called general land today. If it's still held by the owners and their successors down through the ages, and it hasn't turned into general land, then it's still Māori freehold land. Yeah. Sometimes you can have this interesting cut across, like land that was taken by the Crown, that was then handed back to either iwi or to other iwi or to Māori owners, and sometimes those lands would then be automatically, I suppose, Māori freehold land. So that's how you get some quirks. You get a few like that as well. So today we have general land and Māori freehold land are kind of the main statuses of land that you'll find. There's other things like Crown land, etc., but those are the kind of the main ones that you'll see, and the main ones that we're going to talk about in our presentation. All right, so Māori freehold title, or Māori land, and general land. Yeah. Of course, like people, Māori land has a bit of a whakapapa, and so these graphics, and I can't remember where I borrowed these from, I got them many years ago, but I came from a guide, I think. But these graphics show the relationship between what we call a parent block and a partition from that block. So once upon a time, just on the left-hand side there, you had a single block of land that maybe passed the court and was given to a bunch of owners, and then later on in time, those bunch of owners decided to cut the land down. Right, so on the left-hand side, we have what's called a Whenua Hou block, and then maybe a decade later or so, the owners in there decided that they want to cut the land up, partition it amongst themselves to build a house or whatever. And as you can see there on the right-hand side, the land's been cut up. So we now have Whenua Hou number 1, Whenua Hou number 2, Whenua Hou number 3, and Whenua Hou Road as well. That have all been cut up from that original block. Right? And that's how we get all those funny numbers from those various partitions that we have. So just to give another example, here we have Whenua Hou at the top, that blue box, say that was customary land, and then it went to the courts, and then the courts awarded the land into maybe 3 parts plus a roadway. And so they said, okay, these are the owners, and that section of owners will get Whenua Hou 1, that section of owners will get Whenua Hou number 2, and Whenua Hou 3 will go to these owners, right? That's fine. And then time goes on, and then eventually the owners of number 3, they decide they want to split up the land again. So it becomes Whenua Hou 3A and Whenua Hou 3B. Right, or it might be 3C, 3D. There might be a few of them in there. And then time goes on, and then these little owners in 3A, they're like, we want to cut it up. We want to cut it up again. So they cut it up again, and it becomes 3A1 and 3A2. And then so on and so on. 3A1 gets split up again, and it becomes 3A1A, 3A1B, and 3A1C. Right, those are all the different partitions over time. So that's how you kind of read all of these long block names that you'll see. The reason why they have all of those numbers and letters is from the land being cut up a bit at a time. And what you can do, say we have a look down at Whenua Hou number 3A1C, right? If I go backwards and take away the C, and I put my finger over the C and it just says 3A1, well, that's where that land block came from. So C used to be part of a block called 3A1. We go up to 3A1 and I cover that 1 and it just says 3A. We know that the parent block, the block that 3A1 and 3A2 originally came from, was 3A. If I block the A and 3A, we know that originally this land block was called Whenua Hou 3. Right, so that's its whakapapa going back up the tree. And that's essentially how land blocks and partitions work, and why you get those multiple names, right? As the land is cut up and cut up and cut up over time. And it's a little bit like whakapapa. And whakapapa can also, I suppose, change aspects of land and who holds what. So for example, perhaps in the old days we have this chief called Te Ariki. This is pre-colonisation, and he had a land block. And let's say he had Whenua Hou. He was the holder of Whenua Hou, right? And then over time he had Te Ariki 2 and Te Nui. And in their time, that's when the courts came along and started deciding who owned what. And so the court decides perhaps, Te Ariki, your father was the man who owned the whole block, and I'm going to give you guys will be the owner of that whole block. You guys will be the owners of Whenua Hou. And then Te Ariki and Te Nui ask, well, actually, we'd like to own our bits outright. Could you partition it? And so the block gets cut in half, and Te Ariki gets Whenua Hou number 1, and Te Nui gets Whenua Hou number 2. Right? And then over time it passes down through those generations, and it may get down to Thomas's generation, and they essentially get cut up as well. Yeah? So that's how land actually kind of works. The other thing that this chart kind of shows you is why people sometimes have different names in the Māori land court record. Let's take, for instance, Te Nui. They had 2 separate names. He had 2 sons here. We've got 2 sons. We've got a Hemi Te Nui and a Thomas Te Nui. But you see, when their names were recorded, Te Nui became one name, right? And instead of being taking their father's name as their last name, they've taken as their first name, or what have you, they've taken his name as their last name. So Te Nui is the name of the father, and they've taken his first name as their last name, right? And that can be the same with the mother. Sometimes people will take their mother's first names as their last names, especially pre-1900, depending on where the land came from. If it come from dad's side, sometimes you'll take dad's name. If it come from mum's side, sometimes you'll take mum's name, right? Very fluidic how people work with their ingoa. So we have Thomas Te Nui here, some kids, and Susan and William decide to take their father's first name as their last name, just like their father did. But Ben wants to be different. He wants to keep the ancestral name of his grandfather, and so his name is Ben Te Nui. Right, so although they're from the same whānau, they're full siblings in this case, Thomas, someone called Thomas, or someone called Te Nui, and that's a very common thing that you'll see in families. Right. Just a very, very quick look at how succession works compared to today and how it used to work and those kind of things. So here's a whakapapa here. We have Tama married Hine, and they had Mita, Pene, and Te Wai. And we've given a scenario here. Tama dies leaving no will. Where should his land interest go? All right, so let's take it from now. How would it be now? So Tama dies, he leaves no will, he's left a wife and kids. Where will his land interest go? Well, generally, if he was still with his wife when he passed away, she'll be entitled to what they call a life interest to those lands. That doesn't mean she owns lands outright, just means that temporarily the lands may shift across to her so that she will receive a widow's benefit. So any money or funds that come from that particular land will come to her in her lifetime. If she should die, or if she should remarry, then the interests go down to the 3 children equally if there's no will. Yeah. So that's just something to be aware of. If you leave, same thing. Same if it was reverse. If it was reverse and Hene passed away, Tama could get a life interest as well. Right. He doesn't have to take it. She doesn't have to take it. They can bypass him and go to the kids if they wanted to. But that's just to look after them in their old age. Right, again, same whakapapa. This time Hene dies and leaves a will passing her land interests on to the neighbour Hare. Hare has no connection to the land. What should happen here? Now, besides us questioning what was happening with Hene and Hare, the main thing we have to understand is that depending on which time period this happened, things are going to be a little different. Pre-1993, you could leave your lands in a will to Tom, Dick, Harry, or the dog. Doesn't matter. Right, pre-93 you could do that, so if your will was dated around then, that could happen. Post-1993, it can't happen, right? You can't have lands going out of the bloodline, right? It's much more complex than that, but that's we're just going to call it that for now. But it would go down to her children, essentially, her closest relatives. So that part of the will would be declared void by the courts. There'll be no succession to it. But that's only if it's post-93, right? If it's pre-93 and depending on when Hene died, of course, Hare may be able to inherit those, right? So a lot of those old wills, where people passed away, those wills still have to apply to the laws that applied at that time. Alright, so what should happen here? If it's the modern era, that part of the will be womp, crossed out, and it would go to Hene's closest relatives. Right? It would be just like if she passed away with done. So Tama may get a life interest or may go to the kids. Kapai. This one's a little bit more complex. We have Hene, and she had 2 husbands, Tama and Hone. And through Hone she had Rāpata, and through Hene she had Mita, Pene, and Te Wai. So in this case, Pene dies without issue. Right? Pene died without issue, his parents having predeceased him, so Tama and Hene have passed away. Pene had shares in the Waikite block of lands, which he got from his father. He left no will. Who should his interest go to? So that's one to think about. Who would the interest go to? Interest in Pene, he's left no issue. They can't go back to the parents, or whichever parent it came from. So where would it go? Yeah, and it seems kind of obvious, but maybe it isn't to some, is that it would go up the whakapapa tree. It can't go back to dad, so it has to go crossways, and it will go to the kids, right? To Pene's siblings, but only those siblings that are related through the father, right? So in this case, they would go to Mita and Te Wai. Rāpata, who is a sibling, is related through the mother's side. So if the lands were through the mother's side, it'd be different, but they're through Pene's father's side. So his interests that he had, passed away, left no issue, would be split equally between Mita and Te Wai. Alright, ka pai. That's a fun game. You could play that with heaps of different scenarios, I guess. Right, jurisdiction of the court. So the work of the court today includes successions to estates. They create management structures, which is land trusts. They appoint, replace, or remove trustees to those management structures. They determine various legal claims about Māori land. They determine status of land. Is it Māori land? Is it freehold land? Is it crown land? All of those kind of things. Reservation, etc. Alienation of land. So the sale of land, but also the leasing of land can come under the court's umbrella. Historical claims to the chief judge, which is a whole other issue. You probably need a whole other presentation about those. And then title improvements, which are things like partitions and occupations, right? So that's kind of the mahi of the court. And the work of the court and how it processes that mahi hasn't changed all that much since the court's inception. You essentially have an applicant. In the old days, it might be a person claiming to own land, or a succession, or what have you. So there's someone who needs to make a claim of the court, so they're the applicants. There's a judge who needs to hear that particular claim and make sort of judgment about it and give some sort of orders. And then there's that decision or judgment is made, yes or no. And then either the case is dismissed or an order is entered. Now, all of those processes create court records, right? And if you're a researcher, court records are sort of the gold out there. They're the things that you can discover information by following those things back. A paper trail is great. You can discover all sorts of things. And all these processes create certain things. An applicant creates an application. So all the way back to the 1860s, the old people would write an application. The applications were in Māori. They'd have to write a pen. They'd have to sign it themselves. All of those kind of things. So there's an application. You go to the court. The judge has to assess it. And that assessment is going to be in the minute book, right? If the court makes an order, then there's going to be a court order as well that's also created. If there's no court order and he just dismisses it, that evidence is going to be inside a court minute book, right? So there's all of these kind of things, all these court records that are created essentially from just this judicial process. So the Māori Land Court, Native Land Court for its name change, is known as a court of record, and as such it has an obligation to maintain the records of its proceedings. As such, all proceedings and documents presented in court matters are required to be filed in the court's registry of proceedings and be fully available to parties involved, members of the court, superior courts, should the matter be appealed, and to an extent publicly accessible. Right? So the Māori Land Court records are a public record. They're accessible unless there's good reason or a court order making it inaccessible. These records then become part of the permanent record of the court. A definitive list of the permanent record of the court of what it contains is helpfully set out in Part 7 of the Māori Land Court Rules 2011, and in particular Rule 7.19. So this includes minute books, that is, the books or binders containing the hard copy record of proceedings of the court, the files of the court containing the hard copy applications and other documents and materials compiled by the court in respect of each proceeding, original orders and recommendations issued by the court or the registrar, instruments of alienation, statements of accounts, block order files or other documents or plans or copies of any of them relevant to the court, title, record, and deposited with or held by the court, or any other documents, plans, materials, or records that a judge or registrar considers necessary for the function to preserve the court's historical record of title and ownership. So they tend to keep almost everything. Everything tends to be kept, yeah? As record keeping on individuals, especially Māori, were haphazard in the early decades of the colony, the court is one of the few records that might prove useful for filling in gaps. For example, in 1847, an ordinance for registering births, deaths was issued to provide a means to register births, deaths, and marriage of Her Majesty's subjects in the colony of New Zealand. However, Section 37 specifically excluded the ordinance from applying to Māori. Civil registrations of births, deaths, and marriages became formalised for Europeans by the Registration Act 1858. However, such registration was not required of Māori until 1911 for marriages and 1913 for births and deaths. So, we don't have that official record that's available to others. However, despite this, details of births, deaths, and marriages, as well as other events, might be mentioned either directly or in passing within the court record. Thus, while seemingly documenting the statutory functions of the court, the records can helpfully provide a primary source of iwi, hapu, and individual history. Those from the late 19th century in particular contain detailed oral historical narratives produced during the course of the court's work. Right, so there's some real nuggets in there that you won't find anywhere else. So, a few of those that are listed there, there's court minute books, court orders, ownership schedules, estate files, personal files, wills, adoption files, which are closed and not open to the public, correspondence, consolidation records, original applications, and some sketch plans. The ones that we're going to look at are the minute books, court orders, and ownership schedules. Those are the ones that I call kind of the golden records. Let's have a quick talk about research in general. So your research should start out purposefully, starting with an answer to the following question. What am I looking for? What do I want to answer? Your answer or answers to this will guide how you would carry out your research. Right? If you have a good idea of what you're after, much easier to track things down, and you'll stay on point. It's very, very easy to get distracted by other things you may find on the court record, which is fine. That's all part of the fun of the journey. But you want to make sure you answer the question and that you're really focused about that question. So a few examples. I'm looking for whakapapa. Cool. You're going to search everywhere where there's whakapapa. I want to know how come uncle has shares but not dad. Cool. You're going to have a look at orders and ownership schedules and court minutes. I'm looking for history of an ancestor. Oh, that's harder, but that's doable. Right? That's looking at a lot of minute books. I am looking for land block histories or history. Cool. Again, minute books and those kind of things. I'm looking for iwi hapu or whānau history. Again, minute books are going to hold all those kind of things as well. Yeah. So just some examples. You'll have your own thing that you're looking for. Hoki whakamuri. Take a bit of a stock take. So you've formed your research question or questions. Now take stock of what you already have and what you already know. Right. So you don't want to be going backwards and forwards because you think, oh no, I just remembered that thing. Have a stock take. Your clues are your memory, what you remember, with other whānau members, what they remember, what papers they have, with the kaumātua, and then of course old family papers. Many of us have old travel bags that are full of nans and koros and mums and dads and all sorts of their papers. What's in there? Is there anything in there that can either help you answer it or help you on the pathway to find the answer? So take stock take, very important. And the take, tangata or whenua. So your questions will often fall into two categories when it comes to the court. Sometimes it can be a mix of the two. So 1, questions about land blocks, or 2, questions about people, individuals, whānau or iwi. Alright, so one's the tangata side and one's the whenua side. And sometimes there's a mix between the two. And it will either be about the current state of things, how they are today, how blocks or owners are in the present, or it will be about the previous state of things, blocks or owners in the past, right? Those tend to be the your touchstone points that you start and how you frame things going forward. So again, we have the 3 golden records there. We have the minutes, court order in the middle, and then an ownership schedule, an example of one ownership schedule anyway, on the right-hand side. Okay. So what's useful about minute books? Minute books give us our why. They generally contain a transcript, a narrative, or summary of evidence presented to the court during the course of a hearing, as well as a record of the court's directions or decisions, which can be of very length, quality, and legibility, with the earliest minute books containing some of the most interesting and detailed historical information, but also being hard to read, of course, because they're handwritten. Each minute book series has its own name and identifying number. They are indexed by case, dated, and their pages are known as folio. The court uses a kind of shorthand within documents for minute book references. For example, 12 Rot 359 to 361 refers to Rotorua Minute Book 12, pages 359 to 361. Court orders. While the court minutes give the context and kōrero regarding applications to the court and decisions of the court orders are the legal instruments or the documents that give effect to the court's decisions. There are all kinds of different orders for succession to lands, payment of funds, partitions, etc. But for the workshops that we did, we focused on title orders and succession orders. Right? Minute books and court orders share the same referencing. Right? So there's a minute book reference. We can see where that blue box at the top is. That's where the minute book reference will be. And they share the reference because the order would have been made in court, and the minute book records that order, and then that reference has to be placed on the court at the top of the court order to show where it happened, I guess. Right, so it's a bit of a cross-reference. So they both carry the same reference. If you can just see it there, it says Rotorua MB 95/341, which would be 94 Rotorua Minute Book, page 341. If we have a look on the order tells us what kind of case it was, whether it's a succession or a partition. In this case, it's a partition. The next part, we'll talk about the date, what date it happened, where the court was located and who the judge was. Then it should give you details of what the court order was. And then if it involves a block, it'll give you block details as well at the bottom there, or sometimes on a separate, or quite often, I suppose, on a separate page, on a separate schedule. Then we have ownership schedules. So while court minutes record the context, and court orders are the instruments. The court orders are the instruments which give effect to the court orders. Ownership schedules were a way of recording transactions that affected actual ownership on each individual block. Since the early 2000s, this process has been undertaken with MLIS. However, the pre-2000 paperwork is still held by the court and provides a rich source of information, as well as a way to backtrack through the chain of ownership. And if you backtrack through the chain of ownership, who got what from where, and go back and back and back, you can almost build a little whakapapa from that. So in this particular version, and most of them are very similar, This is a fairly modernish version that was used in the 80s, but essentially we have the deceased owner, and you can see who it is there. We have a minute book succession reference. Cool. So that means that I can go use that minute book reference to check the minute book and see what was said and what's the context. We see what kind of order it was. In this case, it was a succession. Other orders could be gifts and things like that. We have a date of when it happened. And then we have the people that are affected by it. So at the top we have the deceased owner, and then we have the ones who succeeded, right? And in this case it's succeeded equally. There's their names, there's their shares that they got out of it, all of those kind of things, right? So there's some real useful information there. And I could do the same thing with Rua. The person who's at the top of this, I could find out where Rua got Rua shares from, and then work my way backwards, okay? So take a screen grab of this. This is a really cool way of searching back and finding that information you may need, using partition orders and those kind of searches and that kind of stuff. And essentially it's just a bit of a flow chart, and it may be a little bit hard for you to understand it, but once you kind of get a handle on how these things actually work, it does make it a little bit easier over time, and understanding. The more and more you use it, I guess, the more you'll understand the court records and what each one actually means, because they can get confusing, right? But once you understand, okay, the court minute is this, the court order is going to give me that information, and then the ownership schedule, which is a super important one, is going to give me all sorts of other information, right? And so, yeah, take a screen grab of that and have a little play with that. Just a little bit of Pātaka itself. So following many years of development by the Ministry of Justice, Pātaka Whenua platform was released to the public in late 2023, although it wouldn't become fully functional until early 2024. Pātaka Whenua is a web-based application, a customized version of an American platform, built to replace its aging Windows-based predecessor, which was Multi-Land Information System, or MLIS. As with MLIS, Pātaka Whenua functionality could be usefully split into 4 interrelated functions. So while we're going through this, exactly what I said before, it's good to know the beast. It's good to know the subject of what you're trying to get information from. Right? So Pātaka Whenua has a few different functions. Land registry, right? So it records the ownership of land. It says who's the current owner. That's land registry. Court record, so it holds all of those court records going all the way back in time that the court has to keep. Application management, so that's something that as a user we're able to now make our applications online, pay for it online. We can do that all through Pātaka Whenua. I'll touch on it, I won't actually show it, but I'll touch on it a little bit. But that just means that you don't need to go into the court anymore to put applications in. And then there's a case management function that we don't see. Right, that's what the staff get to see, and that's the thing that puts your court application on the conveyor belt and goes through its many processes and looks after it. Right, so these are all the things that Pātaka Whenua does, but the main ones that we use will be the those first 3, or really the first 2, especially in this presentation. So what kind of records do you get? So Pātaka Whenua has a number of records that you can now get online. Derivation reports, minute book, and minute book indexes, court title orders, ownership and memorial schedules, survey plan, historic record sheet, and pānui. Now it looks really exciting when you see all that. You can get all sorts of things, but not really. There's a lot of promise, but the implementation's a little bit different. So derivation reports are really cool. They are things that case managers have to create so they can make sure that the application they're doing a succession for is their person. So they have to go through, have a look at that person's lands and pretty much marry up the whakapapa and make sure it's the correct person, diving through the court record. Sounds great. That'll be a great tool for all of us. However, the only ones that are uploaded, that appear to be uploaded at the moment, are all the ones that are current. So things that are going through the court at the moment, those are the ones that are going up, which is still really cool. But they use derivation reports, or Part 4 search reports, they call them in the court. They've used them for decades and decades and decades. So we don't have the decades and decades and decades, but we do have the ones that are coming out now. So that's useful. Almost, as far as I know, all the minute books and their indexes are online. As far as I know, all the court orders are online. As far as I know, all the ownership schedules are online. Survey plans, the court never had a good, never kept a good collection of survey plans, because that's not its job. That's the job of LINZ. So all those original plans are sitting with LINZ, and a lot of them now are sitting with National Archives. But there are copies. There's some copies that the court kept. Historic record sheet sounds really interesting, but really that's just pretty much the whakapapa with the whenua. It shows the land and how it was broken down into various blocks and sections. So you can have a look at that. That can be useful as you're trying to trace things back. But that's about it. It's just literally the cover sheet of some files that had that information. And then there's the court pānui. Right, so it does some really cool things that the old system, which was Māori Land Online, didn't do. In particular, it does all of this historical stuff that you can now get directly. And that's pretty much all the stuff that I've talked about. Land registry function is that one there. But let's get on to Pātaka Whenua itself. Right, so I'll do a quick little slideshow here, and then we'll go to the website and have a little play. So essentially we have Pātaka Whenua at that particular web address. But you can just go to Māori Land Court or type in Māori Land Court on Google. It'll come up and it'll essentially show you this is the leaping page, the jump on page. Most of it is the Māori Land Court information, but at the top there in the green banner with the red arrow is pointing, that's where you click to get taken to Pātaka Whenua. Right. And just some, I suppose, frequently asked questions. Do I need to sign up to use He Pātaka Whenua? No. To use it? No. To search for things? You do not. Are there any benefits to signing up? Yes, but to me, this is just my point of view, there are very few. You'll be able to make applications to the court and pay for those applications directly online rather than register as a guest user. So there's that, which is really quite a cool little thing. You can make the application online and then follow it as the case develops over time. And all your letters and stuff will come via the website, as well as your email, I presume. Two, this will allow you to keep a digital version of that application and watch the progress of your application. You also receive messages from the case manager via that account. Yeah, so that's a good thing about registering for one. Three, you'll be able to save block details and ownership lists as a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet. So if you're in there as a guest, and you don't log it, you can't readily print ownership lists, right? Whereas if you are logged in, you can then print them off as a PDF or even an Excel sheet, which is really cool if you want to research through owners, the particular owners of a land block. Number four, if you have an account, you can also lodge inquiries online rather than as a guest user. Now, at some point in time, I'm sure this is going to be a fantastic addition, but it doesn't really work for me at the moment. I've done it a few times and it hasn't really worked. When it was first launched, I put an inquiry on just to see how long it would take to get done, and that was something like July maybe last year, I think July or August last year, and now we're in 2024, and we're in September and it still hasn't been answered. So I think there's an issue there. Obviously, a lot of the inquiries at that time when I first sent it all went to one place. I believe they've actually changed that system now, so it goes back to the districts like it used to. But at the moment, I would hold off on using it. I would instead go in and see the staff and have a talk to them face to face. To be honest, that's probably the best way to do it. I mean, you could bring up as well, but if it's quite a complex issue, definitely just go down and maybe make a booking or sit down with the staff at the front counter. That's the way I would do it. Alright, so when you log in, you're going to be presented with this dashboard, which is essentially your home page. And that's made up of a few parts there. I've kind of written them down. So dashboard's your home page. You have the block map, which is, if you click on that, it'll give you a map of Aotearoa, and you can just zoom down to the land block, that's a Māori land block, that you want information on, right? And so that's exactly the same as the old Māori Land Online. You just click on it, it'll give you a link, click on the link, and it'll open up the land block, and it'll show you who the owners are, it'll show you how many owners there are, how many shares people have. So that's if you know where the block is located, right? Then there's a search function, and the search function has a number of ways of searching. You can search via block, via document, via management structure, that is to say trust or ownership. And so we'll go through that in a minute. And there's the buttons there to either register or to log in. Right? You can register as a new user, and then you can log in, and then you'll be logged into your account. Ka So those are the parts that make up Pātaka Whenua. Essentially, it's three parts there. There's your dashboard yourself. There's the block map, which is just a GIS map, a Google map, if you will. They can fly around and touch the block that you're after, want information about. And then there's the search function, which has specific searches, ways you can search for a block or document, management structure, or ownership. Ka pai. This is an example. This is just the block search screen, so you can put the block name in there. Document search screen, again, you can put the document name in there. Then the management structure, aka the trust search screen. And then there's the ownership, individual ownership, the individual that you're trying to look up, whether it's yourself or someone else in the whānau, mum, dad, whoever it might be. Right, so that finishes that. I know that was a little bit quick. Hopefully you managed to grab everything you needed to grab. And now we're just going to have a really quick look at the website itself. So here we go. Let's make that big there. So like I said, to get to Pātaka Whenua, we hit the green area up here. If you want some guidance, want to read some material on how to use it, you can click this area up here. But we're going to go straight into it. Alright. So, just as I was showing you before, your dashboard is your desktop. That's where everyone starts off. If I wanted to log in, I could log in here or log in down here. Or if I wanted to create an account, I could create an account and then log in. We're not going to do that. As I say, you don't need to do it to actually search and use most of the services. Although there are some bonuses with registering. But ka pai, we're not going to do that. So the first thing I'm going to look at here is, so we're on dashboard at the moment. That's our home page. If we go down to block map, you can see here, there we are. That's Aotearoa, New Zealand. And we're able to zoom down. And you can see all these grey shapes areas here. These are all multi-land blocks. Right, so I could pick any of those multi-land blocks. I can zoom all the way in as close as I want to. And just click on them, and then it'll pop up. For example, this one that I touched is Ōwhata 2B, and it gives you a bit of a breakdown there. It tells you the hectares, tells you when the block was created in 1922. It gives you the plan number if you wanted to look up the plan at LINS, or some libraries have the plans for free that you can get off certain databases. The LINS reference, how many shares and how many owners. So it's a snapshot, essentially a snapshot, and I could do that with any of these blocks along here. Just click on them. And eventually it'll come up. But what I can do, if I want to know more about the owners or more information about the block, I can just click the block name, and it's going to open, it's like another window, I suppose. It opens another window there. It shows you the same information that was on the snapshot. So your reference numbers, total shares, allocated owners, all of that kind of stuff. How big it is. And if I scroll down a little bit more, it's got some other details which we'll go into a little bit later. Alright, so that's the stuff that you can get through just by searching it. If you find it really hard to search, you can't tell because this is a topographical map, so it doesn't give you details. So maybe you know where the block is, but you just can't tell from here. If you just go on the right hand side here, just like Google, and if you click hybrid, that's probably the best way to do it. Alright, it's going to give you a satellite version. So if we scroll down a little bit further, let's say, and you think, oh yes, no, this is, I live here, I want to have a look at the multi-land block next door, this is the one here, and then you click it, and same kind of thing, it's going to give that information, and then if you want to read that information, click it again, and it'll bring up the block details, which you can then, alright, go through. Ka pai? So that's one way of searching, very intuitive that way, and it's very much the same as what we used to have with the old system. Right, with the old system we used to have. Alright, but maybe we don't know where the block is, or we're after specific information. So at the bottom here we have search, and if we click search, it's going to give me a number of ways to search. Now the first way I'm going to do it is the one that's probably natural to many people, is to just search ownership. So if I click ownership here, right, it's going to give me this place here where I can put in an owner's name, if I had an owner's ID, or block names or block IDs, all of those kind of things. These will help narrow the search down. But this is essentially the old ownership. Put the owner in, and it will tell you who the current owner is. I can't tell you who the historical owners are, but it's going to tell you who the current owner is today at this very moment. Now, we're going to search for a common name, John Smith, right? We're going to search for John Smith. and the system will list various versions of the name and show you the land block and shares. So, okay. So, John Smith. I'm going to put in John Smith here. John Smith. And you'll see that it pops up and tries to propagate it with a whole bunch of versions of that particular name. Now, what you can't do when you're searching for someone, what you shouldn't do, I suggest you don't do, even if it's a common name like John Smith, is trying to put a full name in. Maybe it's John Huani Michael Smith, and you go, John Huani Michael. Oh no, it's not showing anyone, yeah? Because you're being too specific. I suppose that the best rule is kind of think the less is more rule is better. So instead of being really ultra specific, if we just put in John Smith here, the system is going to come up with a whole bunch of names that have that in it, and you can choose. You go, oh, look at all these John Smiths in here, and I can scroll up and down, and we can actually find it. Rather than if you put in, say, George John Smith or something like we have here, it may not come up. It may just bring you up. It may not come up at all because you haven't put junior or senior or something like that. If you put John Huani Smith, there's no John Huani Smith there, right? So at least this way you get to go, oh, look, here's a John Smith. I'll click that. We won't worry about any of the other categories, and we'll just do search. Right. And then eventually it's going to think about it, and it's come up with about 10 pages or more, John Smith obviously, and there's a whole bunch of them. All right, and these are the names of the owners, and this is the land block. This is the type of ownership they have. Just be aware, absolute doesn't mean that they own the land block absolutely. It just means that they own their shares absolutely, because sometimes you can have a joint tenancy like you have down here. Or trusteeship or what have you. So yeah, when it says type, it doesn't mean you own it absolutely, it just means they own the shares absolutely. Now in this case, we're going to narrow it down more. So I know it's a John Smith, but look, I just want to see the John Smith who's in the Wairiki district, so I'm just going to say Wairiki district of lands. I'm going to go search, and it's going to narrow it down a little bit more. Hopefully. Right, here we go. And so it's narrowed it down a little bit more. Okay. And so here's the list of names, land blocks, their type, those shares that they have, and then along here, it's going to have minute book references. You'll notice that Perry up here doesn't have one, but these ones down here all have these many minute book references. So if there's a minute book reference, that's going to take you to the minute where they got their shares, essentially. So we can't just click on it, unfortunately, but there is a way to look these up, and I'll show you a little bit later. If there's no reference there, it just means that they probably received their shares maybe pre-2002, pre-1999. So essentially, if someone was succeeded to and got their shares after 2002-ish, then they're likely going to have their reference. Not 100%, but they're more likely. And the further in the modern era you go, they're definitely going to have those references about where they got their interest from and where the minute book is, so you can have a look at it. Yeah, but pre-2002, pre-1999, less likely. And the further back in time you go, even more less likely to actually find those references. Right? Yeah. So it's just something to be aware of. Right. So we've filtered it down. I could go into John Smith's names for Kokohino. Go into here, it's going to give me his ID number, and if I go down here and I click the ownership schedule, it's going to show me not only that he got Kokohino, but he got all of these other land blocks at the same reference, 118 WHK 106 to 107, right? And they're all looped together. Now he might be some owner in some other blocks where it's a different reference, in which case they'll be looped together somewhere else. But all of these ones who got their interest at 118, 106-107 are here. So let's have a look at the one that we were interested in. If I click this one here, there we go. Quite lucky. Sometimes it might not come up, but most of the time it should. In this case, it's given us the order, right? And it tells us here where he got the shares from. And his name should be listed at the end of this order somewhere. There it is, John Smith's over there. These are all the other lands that he is probably included with. We won't go too closely in it, because obviously this is someone else's business, just as an example. All right. So how do we get there again? So you've got to close these windows down, because if you have too many open, the whole system just freezes up. But how did we get here again? So just to go back and to go through it one more time, is that we went to ownership. We typed in a name, and remember, less is more. You can even do part of a name sometimes, and it's a good way you can flip through and hit the one that you're after. But we did that name, we clicked on it, and remember we thought, I'm just interested in this Waiariki lands, so I put Waiariki, then I push search, and there we go, it's come up. And then if I just want some more details about Kokohino, I can click in there. That brings up, go down to ownership, and it brings up all of the lands that he received at the same time as that particular land block. And it gives us a minute book reference. And remember, minute books give us the context, orders give us the legal instrument. And in this case, it's just giving me the legal instrument. Yeah. Cool. So that's a court order. Right. So that's how you search for an individual to see what they own, essentially. So if we close that window down, sorry, got a few windows there. The other way we can search for things is a land block. So perhaps your koro or nan or someone's in a particular land block, and you just want to have a look. Maybe you want to have a look at the other owners. Again, go and use the less is more kind of routine. So Whakapōngākau has many subdivisions out there. And some of them are going to be like 10B, which is cool. And then I can just click one of them. Some of them might be number 10B. Alright, some of them are going to be number dot 10B. Right, and you can see I've gotten different ones for each one of those ways that I've put it down. So you could be very wide and just go Whakapōngākau and make your way through every single it'll take ages to load, through every Whakapōngākau block to make sure that you hit the one you have. Or if you have a number, you just do the number. But just be aware that you may need to do not just the number and your one's not there, and think, oh no, it's not there. You may need to do NO.13, or you may need to do NO.13, or you may need to do NO no space 13. You have to try different ways to get the land block up, is what I mean, right? So, and why is that? That's because when court staff have been recording stuff, there hasn't been really a good standard about how to do it. So it's just changed over time. So some of the old historical blocks will still have Whakapōngākau NO.17C, whereas the modern ones may not have the dot, etc, etc, etc. It's very hard to find blocks sometimes, especially for Rotorua. Our examples are Whakapōngākau Mangarewa Kaharoa. Very hard to flip through all of those blocks of different permutations of the names of the blocks, but that's the only way you can do it. Alright, let's just take one of these random blocks. Let's try 11B6. Go search. There it is there. And if I hit the block ID number, the block comes up and it's the same information I showed you before. Status of land, district it's in, some alternative names that might be known as, how many owners, just in this case 688 owners. If there's shares, the shares will come up there. Hectares, square meters, all of that kind of stuff, right? You have your ownership, which will be here, and under this one will be your land administrator. So if there's a trust, it'll be there, right? But let's close that down. Close that down and close it down. So that's how you find it in a block. Maybe you're looking for Makoia. So it's the same kind of thing. There could be a whole bunch of Makoias out there, but the one that you're looking for is one that is in a particular district. Maybe it's Waiariki district. Push search. There you go. Makoia Island comes up, right? So that's a way to get to it, to navigate to it really quickly. Let's say you got a rates notice. It has a number of names in it. You don't know which name to put on there. If there's a LINS notice title, LINS reference, then you can put that in there, and the LINS reference should come up. I've had a few times, well, almost every time I've tried to use it, where it hasn't worked, so I don't know if that's a glitch in the system or if I'm just putting it in wrong. But that should work. LINS title should work. And it may be that just because LINS have started changing their titles, I'm not sure. Alright, so that's how you search for either in the block name, or you could search if you have the ID number. Maybe you just want to have a look at Waiariki district, and there's different kinds of names, lands here, types. These are all the different statuses you can have. Maybe I just want to see what Māori customary land there is in the Waiariki district. Push search and it's come up with 2, for example. Or maybe I want to see what general land is. I don't even know if they'll be on the system, but what general land might be on the Māori land system in the Waiariki district. And apparently there's a few. So all these are listed as general land. I don't know why. I'm sure there is a reason. But general land generally should be held by LINZ. That should be the place you go to find out what's happening there. Again, I don't know if the Crown land thing will work. Oh no, that's come up as well. So that's kind of interesting. Alright, so that's how we search for land blocks in that one. So we've searched ownership individuals, and now we've searched land block. Whatever land block you're after, just type it in and off you go. Right, one of the things I didn't show you, and let's try Makoia as an example. Let's see, Waiariki. So let's say I'm looking at Makoia Island here. The red triangle that you see at the top there, that's just to say that there's an application regarding that piece of land currently before the court. It doesn't tell you where it is in the process of the court, but it's currently in the court. And it's usually something to do with trustees, but it could be, I don't know, it could be a few things. It doesn't tell you what that application is, just says that there's one there, and you can bring the courts, of course, and find out what that application is. So again, at the top we have our ML plan, we have our status. This one has its shares, so we have the shares, we have how many people hold shares. Block balance, so sometimes blocks become unbalanced, not very common. But historically it did happen where some numbers have gone wrong somewhere, and so it'll say unbalanced. And it's the job of the court to actually balance those out. So most of them should be balanced these days. It's from a historical issue. Hectares, square meters, perches. We have our little map there, map window showing that land block. And if we wanted to, if we just want to get a bit of context of where it is, we can just zoom out a little bit. And you can see, it's showing me that it's in Lake Rotorua. These references down here are usually the title orders, so the court's orders that created that land block. In this case, it was created in 56. Usually when I hit these numbers, though, you won't be able to get into it. So what you can do, if you want to see that, is just record those numbers. So that's 3 APRO, so these are minute book abbreviations, 3 APRO 278. So we can probably look that up later, so I can give you an example of it. Now at the bottom of every block, when we open these block kind of things up, there's a few categories along the side here: ownership, documents, LINZ details, memorial schedule. And so currently we're in ownership. If we click this one, it's going to give me the various trusts that are operating over the land block. Right, so we have Makoia Island Trust, for example. Why are there multiple trusts? Well, if you have a look here, you can see that there's different areas, so the trust operates in different parts of it. As far as I know, see, if you have a look here, there's state, the current, superseded. So there's a few that are superseded, so we ignore the superseded. The 2 current ones are the main, is one trust, which I think is the Whenua Trust, which is the Māori Makoia Island Trust. And then this other current one down here is a reserve. So what you can have on top of a land block is 2 or more, sometimes, trusts, different types of trusts running on the land block. In this case, one's a Whenua Trust and the other one's a Māori reservation for the bulk of the island. And if I wanted to find out more information on these trusts and who the trustees are, I could just click on it. It'll come up and it gives me all the trustees, and it gives me when they're appointed, the minute book references, and then it also order references, minute book and order references, the dates that they were appointed, right? Again, we could do that with the other part here, the reservation, same kind of thing. Right? It's going to come up, it's going to give us all the people. And at the top there, if it's a Māori reservation, sometimes it will have really interesting information like the purpose of the reserve and things like that, right? So we went to owners, and then we went to land administrator, and that gives us the trust. Ka pai. Just as an aside, sometimes people ask, how do I get in touch with trustees? It can be a bit hard. One way to do it is to have a look at these trustees and see who was the last appointed. Have a look at the latest ones, and then see if you can get into the minute book or the order. In this case, we could. And sometimes you'll see there, I won't zoom into it, but sometimes you'll see that some of the trustees actually have addresses there, albeit from 2014. So that could be a possible way to get in touch with them if you can't find their offices or any other contacts, is to use the court order. Moving on though, so that's administrator. That's how we find out who the trustees are. I want to see who the owners are. Cool. Just click the owner list, arrow there, and because it's a very, very big ownership list, it takes a little while. And there you go, there's all the owners, right? And there's like 455 pages, so there's a lot of owners. If I wanted to print that, going through each one of those and pressing Control P, that could work, but would be very painful. There is a way to print it off or to export it as a PDF or as an Excel sheet. The issue is, though, is that you have to be logged in to do it. So we can't actually do it because we're not logged in. Right? But that's one of the benefits with being logged in, is that you can get ownership papers and all those kind of printed out. So that's ownership there. If we go to documents, it'll give you all of the documents that have that are minute book references. They have to do with all sorts of things that have happened on the island, administration changes and things like that. Right? Most of these will be locked, I think. But even with the references in hand, see, these are all minute book references, you could still track them down. LINS details, that give you the parcel or LINS IDs, which you can go to LINS, type it in, and get some information from LINS. And then there's the memorial schedule. And the memorial schedule, essentially, it records things that have happened on the block that have been recorded with the court. So it could be determining ownership of things. It could be all sorts. It could be all sorts of stuff. Occupation orders are usually recorded there. Leases, long leases anyway, are usually recorded there. Gazette notices, all those kind of things are all listed in the memorial schedule. So it's a great way to understand if anything's been happening with the block, or if people are living on the block, are they living there with occupation orders and things like that. That's the memorial schedule, right? So that's all come under this little profile for each Māori land block. Ka pai? So we can go all the way back. So we've gone through individual ownership. We've gone through blocks. If we go down to management structure, we could type in the name of a reservation trust or any trust, a whānau trust. Find it, put it in. Again, less is more. So you may find it if you use less information. Push search, and then that trust will come up, and then you'll get the same information we were just going through again, showing the trustees and that. Alright, so that's how you can search on management structure. You're searching for the trust. So ownership, you're searching for the individual. Block, you're searching for the land block. Management structure, you're searching for the trust, the name of the trust. And that's how you track things down that way. Finally, we come down to the big guy, which is the document search. Now, this can be quite complex. So if we click documents, so we now have the ability to search and retrieve historical, contemporary documents directly, instantaneously from the court, from the comfort of your own home, which is great. It's a game changer within Pātaka Whenua. No more sitting down at the court, waiting in line, or waiting through documents, or sending emails, or employing someone to go down. You can get it all in the comfort of your own home, or most of it. If you're using this function, the presumption is that you already have a minute book or reference that you want to look up, or you have a land block you want to search for, historical stuff for a particular land block. The most useful documents you can search for that will answer most questions you have are those golden three I talked about before: court minutes, court orders, and ownership schedules. The historical minute books had names based on the geographic location where the case was heard. For example, Rotorua Minute Book, which was often abbreviated as ROT or ROT. Or Whakatāne Minute Book, which is often abbreviated to WHK, etc. In 2010, all the historical location-based minute books ended, and the court created new single minute books for each district. So now we just have one book that's the Waiariki district, one book that's Waikato Maniapoto, one that's just Te Waipounamu. Yeah? So we don't have all those different city ones, town-based ones anymore. All being replaced. Minutes and orders use a version of the same single reference, and that reference is minute book number, minute book name, and page number. Or as the court calls it, volume, minute book, and folio. Right? So 12, ROT 13, all of those things. Orders often have short abbreviations, while minute books use longer abbreviations. As such, volume 34 of the Rotorua Minute Book series, pages 106 to 107, might be read at a Pātaka Whenua as 34 ROT, 106 dash 107 for the orders, but 34 Rotorua MB 106 to 107 for the minutes. So it's the same reference, it's just referred it a little bit differently. Be aware, though, that this is a standard that historically will have many exceptions. This is because how orders and minutes were referenced in the previous system were often dependent on the individual entering the data. So if you can't find the reference you are after, try a few variations or try the less is more rule. Alright, so let's have a look here. So we've gone search, we've gone to document. This is what's come up. Let's have a think about John Smith and where he got his lands from. So you might remember that his reference, I believe, was 118 WHK, which is Whakatane 106. Let's see if anything comes up. Fingers crossed, because sometimes it does feel like you need to cross your fingers. Right, there it is, 106 107. Push search. And that's come up with the order. Right, that's the order. So if I click on it, cool, it's going to show me the order eventually when it decides to load. Right, that's the called order there. If we close it, what if we want the minute book though? So we're actually after the minute. In that case, if we do 118, we do the long version. Minute book. What was our pages again? 106. 106. There it is, 106 to 107. Push search. Right, and that's our minute. Scroll down, and there's our minute there. Alright? So just like I said before, the minutes provide you the context of what happened and why it happened. The court order provides you with the instrument, the legal instrument which made whatever changes happen. Kapai? So minutes and orders can be searched for from here if you have the reference. You could also search, for example, a block. Let's try. I don't get what. You search for a block. And you can actually just push search if you wanted to. You don't have to choose the document type. Push search and it's going to give you, hopefully, a whole bunch of different document types that you can look up. So the document types it's going to give you is the orders that are pre-1999. I don't think it gives you the post-2002-ish ones, but I can't quite remember at the moment. It's going to give you the ownership schedules, which are always cool to have a look through and see the ownership and where ownership actually came from. It's going to give you, what else is it going to give you? The record sheet, I think I mentioned that before. So it's going to give you a whole bunch of historical documents that you can just look through. And then it's going to give you all those orders as well. Alright, and so if I jump on one of those historic ownership schedules, right, there we go there. And it tells you who are the owners at that point in time. Alright, lists all the owners, and then it shows you essentially who succeeded to who and where their ownership went to over time. Can't play. So that takes a lot of exploration, but over time, if you explore those quite a bit, you'll be able to find almost whatever information that you're kind of after, really. So it can be a real gold kind of thing using that document search. If you have a look here, it shows you which documents are available, and I kind of touched on them before. Derivation search report, historical memorials or ownership schedules, historic record sheets. Judgments are now up there, minutes, minute book indexes, national pānui, special pānui, orders, survey plans, not very good as I said, better to go to Lynn's, and title orders, which I've never managed to get to work. Title orders are what create blocks, partition orders. I've never managed to get it to work on Pātaka Whenua. I'm not too sure why that is. I'm sure someone would know. But I'm still trying, and I've found kind of workarounds. So that's it. So, quick review. Dashboard, right? That's your leaping off place. Block map, you can zoom around the map if you know where it's located and touch the land block you want to get into that little summary of the land block that'll show you the owners and trustees and all of that kind of stuff, yeah? Or you can go down to search. You can search for individuals under ownership, put in their owner's name. Remember, less is more. Search for the land block if you're after a particular land block. Again, less is more. You could do the management structure, which is just the trust, search for the name of the trust. Again, less is more. Or you could search by going to documents and getting copies of the court documents. Right? And there's so much information that you can get from those court documents. You can get whakapapa, you can get information about the land, all of those kind of things you're able to get. Right? So then, at some point in the future, I may do another video just showing some of the advanced search things that you can do, because there are some cool little advanced things that you can do when you're using it and when you're searching for particular things. But we don't want to put too much on top of it yet. Just get in there, have a play with it, and maybe let me know how it goes if you want to. So e rungi i tērā, tēnei te mihi kia koe o tira kia koutou katoa. Thanks for having a listen to me, and good luck.